She was standing on a small stage, performing a scene from a Tennessee Williams play. Marlon Brando sat in the third row watching. Halfway through her monologue, he stood up, walked toward the exit, left the room. The door closed behind him. Marilyn froze, thought she'd failed. But when that door opened again 5 minutes later, what Brando said changed everything. 1955, New York City. The Actors Studio on West 44th Street, a small theater space where the most serious actors in America came to study their craft. This wasn't Hollywood. This wasn't about glamour or movie star images. This was about the method, about truth in performance, about stripping away everything false until only raw humanity remained. Lee Strasberg ran the studio. He was the high priest of method acting, the man who'd trained Marlon Brando, James Dean, and Montgomery Clift. His classes were legendary, brutal, transformative. And in the fall of 1955, Marilyn Monroe joined. She'd been a movie star for 3 years, had made films that earned millions, had become the most photographed woman in the world, but she wanted to be taken seriously, wanted to be more than just a pretty face, wanted to prove she could actually act. So she left Hollywood, moved to New York, and walked into Lee Strasberg's class. The other students were shocked. These were serious actors, theater people. They'd spent years training, years struggling, years proving themselves, and here was Marilyn Monroe, the blonde bombshell, the sex symbol, walking into their sacred space. Some whispered, some smirked, most were skeptical. "She's just here for publicity," one actor muttered. "She'll quit after 2 weeks," another predicted. But Marilyn kept coming, week after week, sitting in the back, watching, learning, terrified but determined. Lee Strasberg saw something in her, something the others didn't see, a vulnerability, a hunger to learn, a willingness to break herself open. After 6 weeks of observation, he told her it was time to perform. Choose a scene, something that scares you. Bring it next Tuesday. Marilyn spent a week preparing. She chose a monologue from Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire, Blanche Dubois' final breakdown scene. She'd seen the play on Broadway, watched Jessica Tandy perform it, been devastated by it. Blanche was a woman clinging to illusions, pretending to be something she wasn't, desperate to be loved, terrified of being seen for who she really was. Marilyn understood that character in her bones. She read the play a dozen times, read Williams's notes about Blanche, read about the character's history, her pain, her desperate need for kindness in a brutal world. Then she stopped reading and just felt what it was like to be dismissed as just a pretty face, to have people assume you're stupid because you're blonde, to know that everyone wants the image but nobody wants the person underneath. That was Blanche. That was also Marilyn. It was ambitious, difficult, the kind of scene that could expose every weakness. But that's exactly why she chose it. If she was going to prove herself, it had to be with something that terrified her. Tuesday came. The class gathered. About 20 students, some sitting, some standing against the walls, and in the third row someone Marilyn hadn't expected to see, Marlon Brando. He didn't come to class often anymore. He was already a huge star, had won the Oscar for On the Waterfront just months earlier. He didn't need Lee Strasberg's class, but sometimes he'd drop by, sit in, watch the new students. Today was one of those days. Marilyn saw him when she walked in, felt her stomach drop. Of all the days for Brando to be here, he was the gold standard, the actor everyone measured themselves against, the one who'd mastered the method better than anyone. And he was going to watch her perform. She considered running, making an excuse, coming back another week. But Lee was already introducing her. Marilyn will be performing Blanche's breakdown from Streetcar. The class settled, waited. Marilyn walked to the small stage area, just a raised platform, no set, no costumes, no makeup, just her in the scene. She closed her eyes, took a breath, found the character. When she opened them, She wasn't Marilyn Monroe anymore. She was Blanche Dubois, broken, desperate, losing her grip on reality. She began the monologue, her voice shaking, not from nervousness, from the character's fear. The room was completely silent. Lee Strasberg leaned forward. He'd seen Marilyn in class for weeks, but never performing. This was different. This was real. The other students stopped smirking, stopped judging, started watching. And Marlon Brando sat perfectly still in the third row, eyes fixed on her. Marilyn was halfway through the monologue, deep in the character's pain, tears streaming down her face, not performed tears, real ones. She was saying Blanche's lines about needing kindness from strangers, about how fragile beauty is, about how cruel the world can be. Then Brando stood up, right in the middle of her most vulnerable moment. He stood, turned toward the aisle, started walking to the exit. Marilyn saw him leaving, felt something break inside her. She'd failed. It was obvious, so bad that Marlon Brando couldn't even sit through it. Her voice faltered. The monologue stopped mid-sentence. The door at the back of the theater opened. Brando walked through it. The door closed behind him. The room was frozen. 20 people not knowing what to do. Marilyn stood on the stage, tears still wet on her face. But now they weren't Blanche's tears. They were hers. She looked at Lee Strasberg. "I'm sorry. I'll start again." "No." Lee's voice was gentle. "Take a moment." Marilyn wrapped her arms around herself, trying not to completely fall apart in front of everyone. She'd been right. She wasn't good enough, wasn't a real actress, was just a movie star playing pretend. The students shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. This was painful to watch. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes, 3. Then the door at the back opened again. Marlon Brando walked back in. He moved down the aisle, everyone watching him, wondering. He walked right up to the stage, stood there looking at Marilyn. She couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if he was angry or disappointed or what. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know it was bad." Brando shook his head. "It wasn't bad." "Then why did you leave?" He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I had to. I couldn't stay." Marilyn felt her eyes filling with tears again. That was worse. So bad he couldn't even watch. But then Brando continued, and what he said next, Marilyn would remember for the rest of her life. "I had to leave because I couldn't watch anymore. Not because it was bad, because it was too real. You weren't performing Blanche. You were her. And watching someone actually break down like that, actually expose themselves like that, I couldn't sit there and be a spectator to it. It felt wrong." The room was completely silent. "I walked out because you were doing what most actors spend their entire careers trying to do. You were telling the truth. No tricks, no technique showing, just raw, honest emotion. And it was so real that I had to leave the room and collect myself." He looked at her directly. "You're not a movie star playing at being an actress. You're an actress who happens to be a movie star. And if you keep working like this, keep being this brave, you're going to be one of the greats." Marilyn stood there, unable to speak, unable to process what she was hearing. Marlon Brando, the Marlon Brando, was telling her she was good, more than good, real. She'd spent her entire career being told she was beautiful, being told she was sexy, being told she was a good product. But nobody had ever told her she was a real artist. Nobody had ever looked past the surface and seen what she was trying to do, until now. She looked around the room, at the students who'd dismissed her, who'd smirked when she walked in, who'd assumed she was just a Hollywood publicity stunt. They weren't smirking anymore. They were looking at her differently, like she was one of them, like she belonged. One woman in the front row had tears in her eyes, not from Marilyn's performance, from watching Brando validate what they'd all just witnessed. A man in the back nodded slowly, as if something he'd been wrong about had just been corrected. The whole energy of the room had shifted. Marilyn Monroe wasn't the movie star invading their space anymore. She was a fellow actor, someone who'd done the work, someone who'd earned her place here. If stories about finding validation in unexpected places move you, subscribe. This is about being seen. Lee Strasberg spoke up from his seat. Marlon's right. What you just did, Marilyn, was extraordinary. You went somewhere most actors are too afraid to go. You let us see you break. That takes more courage than anything else in this profession. The other students were silent. The smirks were gone. The skepticism was gone. They just watched someone they dismissed as a Hollywood blonde do something none of them could do. Access that level of vulnerability, that level of truth. One student started clapping, then another, then the whole class. Not polite applause, real applause, the kind you give when you've witnessed something genuine. Marilyn wiped her face, still trying to believe this was happening. Brando smiled at her. Don't ever let them turn you into just a pretty face. You've got something real. Protect it. He walked back to his seat. The class continued, but everything had changed. After class, several students approached Marilyn, apologized for how they'd treated her, asked if she wanted to run scenes together. One actor, a man who'd been particularly dismissive, said quietly, "I was wrong about you, I'm sorry. That was some of the most honest work I've ever seen." Another woman, a Broadway veteran, hugged her. "Welcome. You're one of us now." Lee Strasberg pulled her aside. "You're going to study privately with me starting next week." "Really? I don't waste my time on people who aren't serious. You're serious, you're talented, and you're going to do great work." Marilyn's voice was barely a whisper. "I was so sure I'd failed when Brando walked out." Lee smiled. "That's how you know you did something real. When it's so honest that people have to look away, most actors never get there. You got there on your first try." Marilyn left the studio that day feeling different. Not because of the applause, not because of the validation, because for the first time in her career, someone had seen past Marilyn Monroe, the image, and recognized Marilyn Monroe, the artist. Over the next 2 years, Marilyn would study intensively with Lee Strasberg, would become one of his star pupils, would apply the method to her film work. When she returned to Hollywood to make Bus Stop in 1956, the reviews were different. Critics who'd dismissed her as eye candy suddenly called her a serious actress and surprisingly good. She wasn't surprising. She'd always had the talent. She just finally found teachers who saw it. Marlon Brando and Marilyn Monroe would cross paths occasionally over the years, at parties, at industry events. He always asked how her work was going, always encouraged her, always treated her like a peer. In 1960, when Marilyn was struggling on the set of The Misfits, feeling like she was falling apart, someone asked Brando about her. "Marilyn's one of the best," he said. "Most actresses protect themselves. They hold back. Marilyn doesn't know how to hold back. That's what makes her brilliant. It's also what makes her vulnerable." After Marilyn's death in 1962, Lee Strasberg spoke at her funeral. He said something that echoed what Brando had said that day in 1955. She had a luminous quality, a combination of wistfulness, radiance, yearning that set her apart. She was an artist who went deeper than anyone knew. The story of that day at the actor's studio, of Brando walking out and coming back, became legendary among method actors. It represented something important. The moment when Marilyn Monroe stopped being seen as just a movie star and started being recognized as a real actress. Susan Strasberg, Lee's daughter, who was also studying acting, later wrote about that day, "I was there. I watched it happen. Marilyn was transformed, not by the compliment itself, but by being seen, really seen. For years, people had looked at her and only saw the surface. Brando looked at her and saw an artist. That changed everything." The actor's studio still exists today, still teaches the method, still attracts serious actors who want to go deeper. And they still tell the story of Marilyn Monroe and Marlon Brando, the blonde bombshell who dared to be vulnerable, the legendary actor who recognized real talent when he saw it. The lesson from that day in 1955 isn't about validation from famous people. It's about the courage to be real, to strip away the image, to show the truth underneath. Marilyn could have stayed in Hollywood, could have kept making the same kinds of movies, could have protected the image. Instead, she chose to be vulnerable, chose to expose herself, chose to risk failing in front of people who already doubted her, and in that vulnerability, she found what she'd been looking for. Recognition. Not as a star, as an artist. When Brando walked out of that room, everyone thought it was rejection, even Marilyn. But it was the opposite. It was someone recognizing that what he was witnessing was too real, too raw, too honest to treat as just a classroom exercise. It was an artist recognizing another artist and telling her in the most powerful way possible, "You belong here." The most famous moment in Marilyn Monroe's acting career isn't from any of her movies. It's from a classroom exercise that most people never saw. But the people who were there never forgot it. The moment when Marilyn stopped being just a movie star and became an actress who deserved to be mentioned in the same breath as Marlon Brando, all because she was brave enough to be vulnerable, and he was honest enough to acknowledge it.